Okay, so you want to own a shopping mall. You picture the rent checks, 94 stores, thousands of shoppers every day, every one of them paying you just for the privilege of standing in your building. Sounds like the architecture of a quiet fortune? It is not that simple. And what nobody tells you before you sign, what took owning one to understand, is that a mall is not a building full of stores. It's a web, and you just became the center of it. You grew up 20 minutes from a mall like this one. Not this mall. One like it. The kind with a department store at each end and a food court in the middle and a parking lot big enough to lose your car in on a busy Saturday. Your mother worked the register at a fabric store in the East Wing for 11 years. She wore a name tag. She knew the regular customers by their patterns. What they were making, what occasion it was for, how many yards they needed. You used to do your homework at one of the food court tables while she finished her shift. You knew which escalator was slower. You knew which bathroom near the food court was cleaner. You knew the security guard who walked the same loop every 40 minutes and always nodded at you. That mall closed when you were 19. The anchor left first, then the small stores, one by one, the way teeth fall out after the root goes. By the time your mother's store closed, the food court had been half empty for 2 years. She got 2 weeks severance and a handshake. You bought Whitfield Commons 23 years later. You told yourself it was an asset that fit the portfolio. You did not tell yourself the other thing. The other thing was that you were going to build something that held. The email from Patricia arrives on a Tuesday in October. Patricia is the kind of attorney who keeps a single plant on her desk, a small orchid she has somehow kept alive for 9 years, which she considers neither remarkable nor a metaphor. You have never seen her drink anything except black coffee from a thermos she brings from home. She has been your outside counsel for 6 years, and in that time has told you exactly 2 things about her personal life, both unprompted, both delivered in the same flat tone she uses for lease summaries. Subject line, Whitfield Commons. Offer accepted. You sit with it for a moment, not with excitement. You've been doing this long enough that acquisition doesn't feel the way people imagine it does. It feels more like the pause before a long drive when you've checked everything twice and you're still not sure you packed the right things. Whitfield Commons, a regional mall in the southern suburbs of Atlanta. 2 anchor tenants, one at each end, 94 stores between them. 847,000 square feet of leasable space, occupancy at 91%. The previous owner held it for 14 years and is selling to consolidate. The books look clean. You paid $67 million for it. Patricia told you it was a reasonable price. She also told you, the way she tells you things she wants you to carry, quietly, without saying them twice, that the price of a mall and the profitability of a mall are 2 numbers that don't always point in the same direction. One number you'll find when you start reading the leases, $4.80 per square foot. You'll understand why that number matters in a minute. The first thing you learn is that you're not buying a building. You're buying a web. Every lease, every side agreement, every clause written in 2011 by an attorney who assumed certain things would always be true. You inherit all of it, exactly as written. You spend the first 3 weeks reading the actual documents, not summaries, the originals. This is where you find the anchor rent. Whitfield Commons has 2 anchor tenants. Together, they occupy 280,000 of your 847,000 leasable square feet, a third of the building. They pay $4.80 per square foot per year. The inline tenants, the boutiques, the shoe stores, the phone repair kiosks, the jewelry cases, pay between $38 and $62 per square foot per year. You read that again. The tenants with the biggest signs and the most floor space are paying roughly 1/10 of what the small shops beside them pay. And the reason is not what you'd expect. The anchor isn't paying for space. It's paying for its name. The anchor brings shoppers. Those shoppers walk past 47 smaller stores on their way in and back out. Every inline tenant is paying full-rate rent in part to be near the anchor. And part of what they're paying for is the anchor's discounted deal. They are subsidizing, without knowing it, the arrangement that makes them want to be here. The whole web depends on the anchor staying. There's a second layer of income most people don't see. If a tenant's annual sales cross a certain threshold, the lease calls it the break point. You collect a percentage of everything above that line, typically 5 to 7%. A clothing store with a $1.8 million breakpoint that sells $2.4 million in a strong year sends you a check for $35,000 on top of base rent, for nothing except owning the building they're selling inside. Then there's CAM, Common Area Maintenance. Every tenant pays a share of what it costs to run the building, cleaning the walkways, maintaining the parking lot, running security, keeping the escalators moving. Each tenant's share is proportional to their square footage. This is the mechanism that means a significant portion of your operating costs aren't coming from your pocket. They're billed back to the people who benefit from the building being functional. And then there are the kiosks, the carts in the middle of the walkways, sunglasses, phone cases, seasonal gifts, occupy sometimes less than 80 square feet. But they sit in the highest traffic corridors in the building, exactly where every shopper walks. They pay rates 3 to 5 times what the inline stores pay per square foot. The jewelry cart in the main corridor pays $280 per square foot annually. Position is worth more than space. You have 16 kiosk positions at Whitfield Commons. They generate more per square foot than anything else in the building. For 6 months, the numbers work. Then the call from Patricia comes on a Wednesday in April. Hartwell's, your North Anchor, 142,000 square feet. The store at the end where the good escalators are has filed Chapter 11. The company is closing 34 stores. Whitfield Commons is on the list. You are sitting at your desk when she tells you. You don't say anything for a moment. You are thinking about the leases you read in October. You are thinking about a specific clause you noted and moved past because it seemed theoretical. You go back and find it. Co-tenancy. It's in the lease of almost every inline tenant in the building. The language varies, but the substance is the same. If a major anchor closes, the tenants around it may pay reduced rent, typically 50 to 75% of their contracted rate, or in some cases, exit their leases entirely with 30 days notice. You count the stores in the North Wing. 23 tenants within the co-tenancy radius of Hartwell's. 17 have the clause. You call Patricia back. She tells you, if all 17 exercise at the reduced rate, annual revenue from the North Wing drops $1.4 million. If 6 of them choose to exit, and based on their individual terms, 6 have that option, the number is worse. And every store that leaves creates more vacancy, which weakens foot traffic, which puts pressure on the remaining tenants who start wondering whether their breakpoints are achievable in a wing with an empty anchor at the end. One tenant leaving makes it easier for the next one to justify leaving. She calls it the trap door. The mall is still 91% occupied. Hartwell's hasn't closed yet, but the structure underneath it has already shifted. And it started shifting the moment a bankruptcy filing landed in a courthouse in another state that has nothing to do with you. There's something else nobody explains until you own the building. Your costs don't fall when a tenant leaves. The hallways still need cleaning, whether every store beside them is open or not. The lights above a vacant storefront still draw power. Security still walks the full perimeter. The HVAC system heats and cools 847,000 square feet, regardless of how many of those square feet are generating revenue. The parking lot doesn't shrink. Your fixed operating costs at Whitfield Commons run roughly $280,000 a month in utilities alone. Property taxes, $1.9 million annually. Insurance, which has increased 31% in the past 3 years across commercial real estate in the Southeast, driven by weather exposure and claims frequency in exactly the kinds of suburban Atlanta markets where your building sits, another $640,000. None of these numbers appear in the CAM bills you send to tenants. They appear in your operating statements. They appear whether the mall is at 91% occupancy or 74%. And here's the part that catches people. When vacancy rises, the same fixed pool of shared expenses gets divided among fewer paying tenants. Each remaining tenant's CAM bill goes up, not because the building costs more to run, but because there are fewer people sharing the cost of running it the same way it's always been run. Rising vacancy doesn't just mean lost rent from the empty stores. It quietly raises the cost of staying for everyone still open, which is exactly the kind of pressure that pushes the next marginal tenant to decide that their lease renewal isn't worth signing. One departure creates the conditions for the next one. The next one creates the conditions for the one after that. Not dramatically, quietly. The way a building empties when nobody decides to leave, but everyone has reasons. There's a mall Patricia mentioned once, early on, the way she mentions things that are meant to stay with you. Rolling Acres, Akron, Ohio, opened 1975. grew to 140 stores, 5 anchors, movie theater, food court, a Target. By the mid-1990s, 98% occupied. One of the busiest shopping destinations in the region. Then the anchors started leaving, one by one, for various reasons, over various years. Co-tenancy clauses activated. Inline stores left or renegotiated down. The remaining tenants were paying more to maintain a building with less foot traffic to justify being in. 2006, the mall sold for $1.6 million. It had been valued at over $30 million. Interior closed 2008. Last anchor closed 2013. Building sat empty. Scrappers took the copper. Vandals broke the skylights. Rain rotted the floors. The city took it for unpaid taxes. Demolished 2016 to 2019. Amazon built a distribution center on the land. Rolling Acres was 98% occupied at its peak. Less than 2 decades from that number to rubble, not one dramatic event. A sequence of smaller ones, each making the next more likely. You think about your mother's fabric store, the 2-week severance, the handshake. You think about what you told yourself when you signed the papers on Whitfield Commons. You drive out on a Thursday evening after the last meeting has cleared. Not to do anything specific. You tell yourself you want to see the numbers in person. That is not entirely why you go. The South Wing is functioning. The anchor on that end is a grocery format store that signed a 15-year lease 3 years ago with 2 renewal options. The stores around it are open. The food court smells like it's supposed to. A woman at one of the tables is helping a kid with homework, headphones around her neck, bags at her feet. You walk through the connector corridor into the north wing. The temperature drops slightly. You notice this every time you enter this wing. The HVAC here runs the same as the rest of the building, but there are fewer bodies generating heat, fewer lights left on in storefronts, less of the ambient warmth that comes from a space being used. The building doesn't know it's emptying. It just runs. It is not abandoned. Not yet. The lights are on. The floors are clean. The escalator is running. The slow one, the one on the left, moving nobody up and nobody down in a patient, indifferent loop. You used to know which escalator was slower. You know that about every mall you've spent time in. Hartwell's is still technically open. Liquidation. Yellow signs in the windows with 40% off printed in red. The kind of sign that means the opposite of what it sounds like. Fixtures for sale alongside the merchandise. A man in a fleece vest is walking the floor with a clipboard, making notes on things you assume belong to the creditors now. 3 of the inline stores near it have reduced hours. One has a handwritten sign, back in 30 minutes. You have a feeling it's been there longer than 30 minutes. You stop at the midpoint of the corridor and just stand there. You are not looking at the vacancy numbers. You know the vacancy numbers. You are looking at the escalator, running its loop. The mechanical sound of it, that low, continuous hum, is the only sound in this wing right now. Patient, indifferent, not caring whether anyone is on it because it was built to run, and so it runs. There was a security guard at the mall where your mother worked. He walked the same loop every 40 minutes. He always nodded at you when you were doing homework at the food court table. You never learned his name. You wonder sometimes whether he got a handshake too, or just a phone call. Your mother used to say the fabric store wasn't really a fabric store. It was a reason for certain women to leave the house on a Tuesday, to have somewhere to go that wasn't home and wasn't an errand, where someone knew your name and asked about what you were making and whether the last project turned out the way you hoped. When the store closed, she lost the job. She also lost the Tuesday. You look down the corridor at the empty storefronts. Grates pulled down, paper in the windows on some of them, that temporary brown paper that landlords put up to make vacancy look intentional. You think about the woman at the food court table, the kid with the homework. What happens to their Tuesday if the South Wing follows the North? You think about what you told yourself this was for when you signed the papers. You call Patricia the next morning. You ask her, what did the owners of the malls that survived do that the ones who didn't? She says they stopped asking what the anchor space was and started asking what a body that size could become. The ones who kept their properties alive didn't find new department stores. They found things that a phone screen can't replace. Medical clinics, urgent care centers, gyms, co-working offices. One mall in Charlotte converted its entire failing North Wing into a 68,000 square foot medical campus. 3 healthcare providers, a pharmacy, a physical therapy center. Foot traffic 6 days a week. Patients who need parking. Institutional leases with 10-year terms and no co-tenancy clauses. Medical providers don't leave when the retail anchor closes. They become the anchor. You are quiet for a moment. Then you ask her how long the conversion would take. She says 14 months, minimum, $4.2 to $5.8 million depending on the build-out. You'd need to renegotiate 3 existing leases to acquire the contiguous space. There would be a period where the north wing looks worse before it looks better. You tell her to start the paperwork. She doesn't say anything immediately. Then she says, "You know this doesn't guarantee anything." You tell her you know. What you don't tell her, what you've been carrying since you walked the corridor last night, is that guarantee was never the point. The point was building something that tries, something that looks at an empty anchor box and asks what it can become rather than writing down the loss and moving on. Something that doesn't get sold to someone who will let it sit empty while the property taxes accumulate and the skylights go unrepaired and the scrappers eventually come for the copper. You have read the Rolling Acres story more than once since Patricia first mentioned it. You have thought about the sequence: 98% occupied, 5 anchors, then 1 departure, and the co-tenancy clauses, and the pressure on the remaining tenants, and the downward spiral that is not dramatic, but is also not stoppable once it reaches a certain point. A building that had served a community for 30 years, reduced to a cautionary case study in someone else's due diligence packet. The people who were inside it when it worked, the ones who had their Tuesdays, didn't get a warning. They got a handshake. The point was not that. The point was not your mother's handshake. The conversion plan goes to the healthcare broker on a Monday. You're in the Camry in the parking lot of Whitfield Commons when the confirmation comes through. You drove out for no reason, except that you wanted to be near it when the email arrived. You're not sure what that says about you. Probably something. You read the confirmation. You reply, move forward. You sit in the parking lot for a while longer. The south wing is visible from where you've parked. The lights are on. People are moving in and out through the main doors. The woman from the food court is in the parking lot now, loading bags into a car, the kid beside her. They don't know you exist. They don't know what you spent last week deciding. They don't know that the building behind them was 3 lease exits away from a different future. They just know they had somewhere to go on a Thursday evening. That's enough. That has always been enough. You start the car. The north wing will take 14 months. It will cost what it costs. It will not be guaranteed. The building was never really the business. The people moving through it were always the business. And if you choose carefully enough what brings them there, something that doesn't disappear when a company files Chapter 11 in a courthouse somewhere else, the building holds. Not every mall holds. Most don't. But this one is going to try. And it will not be a handshake and 2 weeks severance. Not this time.